You might not believe me if I were to tell you everything you're seeing in this video is from mods installed on top of Fallout 4, but it's true. To a greater extent than any other Bethesda game, I would argue, the modding community has brought the world of horror into Fallout 4 in a truly unprecedented way. So much so that you can entirely transform the game into a singular, standalone, open-world horror experience. What I'll be showcasing in today's video is a series of mods that accomplish just that. While it can be fun to simply slap a couple random horror-based mods into your existing load order to scratch a slight horror itch or vibe while playing the game, with the appropriate list of mods to choose from, you can entirely change the experience of playing this game into something else entirely, and something that is, in my opinion, unlike anything else that exists in the horror genre for video games. For those of you following me from my Fallout 4 experiences days, you know I used to host a mod list on Wabbajack that would auto-install a mod list for Fallout 4 with minimal effort, and would transform the game into a standalone, otherworldly horror experience. This video is my attempt to replicate that list yet again, months later, but this time adding some new mods into the mix, and breaking down the individual mods that make a great horror playthrough in Fallout 4. By the end of this video, you'll have all the mods you need to craft a genuinely terrifying, one-of-a-kind horror game in its own right. This video touches on pretty much every horror mod to ever be created for Fallout 4, barring a few rare exceptions. The structure of this video will revolve around drawing focus especially toward mods that either entirely overhaul the game, or add new quests and locations to explore. The final section of the video will feature a smattering of mods that add those special finishing touches, of which help a horror overhaul feel more comprehensive and immersive. And if you're just looking for links, you can find those in the description. There are also timestamps in the video description if you want to jump around to different parts of the video or draw your focus to discussion around certain mods in particular. I will be taking a deep dive into several of these mods to break down why I feel they are or aren't worth investing your time into, while also offering some constructive criticism and feedback for the mod authors of these mods, in the hopes that it may help inform future updates. Ultimately, this video is intended to be a celebration, showcase, and means of preservation for all the hard work the modding community has put into crafting such unique and harrowing experiences through the mods that they've created. Collectively, these mod authors have dumped literal thousands of hours into creating these mods for us to play entirely for free. And so I have to start with the disclaimer that any negative criticisms I have are entirely intended for constructive purposes and are never made with the intention of bashing an author or their hard work. Free is free, so there is really no room to complain as such. Another little disclaimer is that the mods I have installed may in some instances change the visuals of some of the quest mods featured in the video away from the mod author's original intention, such as turning ghouls into clickers, turning cars into modern-day cars, turning water blood red, turning quarry rocks into sinister-looking hellstones, and so forth. I did my best to maintain the original vision and intent of the mods featured in this video where possible, but please feel free to comment if there are any instances where these changes felt out of place from your experience of playing these mods yourself, and I'll do my best to mitigate and correct that with future edits and correspondence. To me, these minor creative liberties actually helped enhance and breathe new life into the experience of playing these mods and wanting to try something new with each of these mods that I've now played several times over. The last thing I'll mention before diving in is that the next-gen update for Fallout 4 that released in April of 2024 broke a lot of things in the base game, in classic Bethesda fashion, and somewhat stratified the modding community between what we referred to as old-gen and next-gen. Some mods being developed now only work in the next-gen version, but the majority of older mods featured in this video only work on the old-gen version of the game. As such, you will have to downgrade your game to the old-gen version to be able to play several of these mods. To do this, I suggest following the Midnight Ride modding guide, which you will find linked in the description of this video. Follow the manual guide at least through the base finish section, and then get into adding these mods on top. Some knowledge of xEdit may be necessary to know where best to place these mods in your load order, but this isn't a modding 101 video, so I will leave you all to researching how best to get these mods working together. All I'm here for is recommendations today. So let's get into it. I wanted to start this video with the complete game overhauls here, as this is a divergent path that will ultimately determine the end state of your playthrough. The two mods in question featured here are Whispering Hills and Grim the Curse. Independently, they are both amazing mods in their own right, but unfortunately they can't be used together in the same playthrough due to the way that they both overhaul the same elements of the game in dramatically different ways. As such, I highly recommend trying both of them separately to determine which you like more between the two. But to spare you some testing time, I'll start out with comparing and contrasting between the two and offer my opinion on which I think is best to start out with. Starting out with Grim the Curse, or just Grim, this mod was developed by the late great Lu or Lu Ping. Lu is not dead, but sadly did depart indefinitely from the Fallout 4 modding scene with seemingly no plans to return. In his prime, Lu was known predominantly for crafting some of the most iconic visual overhauls of all time for Fallout 4 via a series of weather and ENB preset mods that completely changed the look and feel of the game. Using unique camera techniques and other technical advancements, Lu helped redefine what was possible in terms of visuals for Fallout 4. He pulled forth some of the most progressive and innovative techniques of visual customization available at the time to craft an experience that could easily be adjusted to the preferences of any player. With Grim, in-game you'll have a series of visual presets to choose from to start, and from there you can adjust everything to match the look and feel you're after, whether that be dread, realism, or even found footage. Every aspect of lighting, both interior and exterior, has been overhauled to offer a consistently oppressive atmosphere throughout your playthrough. I find the lighting at night, especially with nighttime god rays, to be especially effective in leveraging the very best elements of the lighting effects available in Fallout 4. A reminder that under the right conditions, Fallout 4 can be a hauntingly beautiful game with lighting methods far ahead of its time for 2015. All in all, Grim offers a fully immersive, customized visual palette that is unlike anything else available in the modding community for Fallout 4. When it comes to audio, Lu managed to construct a truly singular soundscape featuring several hours of deeply unnerving music tracks, complemented perfectly by the use of incidental audio cues or stingers that will play dynamically when something disturbing such as the girl in the white dress appears on screen. I've never seen another mod leverage the use of music in this way, and it always stood out to me as exceptionally memorable and effective in eliciting that predominant sense of tension. Speaking of the girl in the white dress, I haven't touched yet on the main draw or appeal of the mod that gets all those clickbait thumbnails and video titles going, and that is the curse itself. The curse is an entirely optional aspect of the mod that must be activated manually, and is what ultimately transforms the mod into a true gameplay overhaul. With the curse activated, you will be followed by a creepy little girl with seemingly no means of distancing yourself from her. You come to learn through dialogue that the girl more or less serves as your handler through the curse, offering guidance and also occasional protection. Unfortunately, she also appears to be the catalyst of all the evil surrounding you at any given time, and as time progresses, your sanity will begin to falter in response to the myriad horrors you've been subjected to. This system has a great means of progression to it in that by activating the curse, it dynamically spawns new creatures across the Commonwealth, which, I might add, are perhaps the best creature designs I've seen in all of Fallout 4. And this includes a sort of nighttime hunting system where you'll be stalked by a particularly frightening creature of choice unless you manage to stay indoors or on a designated road. Somehow Lu managed to script a means of the game being able to detect whether you are on a road, which will notify you as such of being protected from the stalking hunter or not, but as soon as you deviate, expect the worst. This game mechanic is absolutely ingenious and terrifying, and it ultimately forces you to rework your means of navigating the Commonwealth to avoid traveling at night or only on roads if you have to, as many of these creatures are either incredibly weak or entirely resistant to conventional weapons. Instead, you'll need to find new weapons imbued with silver ammunition and other various black magic items capable of putting down especially large beasts from hell. While I do love many of the gameplay systems the curse introduces, this is also also where some of my critiques begin to form, as some of the elements it brings forth that cannot be customized are a bit too cumbersome for my liking. For starters, the girl in the white dress following you around constantly, while entertaining to see at first as she will actively fling around enemies like sock puppets while screaming at them, gets to be rather grating over time. I sort of wish there was a way to lessen her constant presence besides just outright killing her, which you can do, but then it seemingly ends the curse for a short period of time, which is more of an all or nothing solution. There are also these sort of kind of not really quest lines that the curse and the girl bring about that are extremely vague, intentionally so according to the author, but the impetus placed on the player by activating the curse is to pursue and resolve these quests as quickly as possible, not only because the dynamic spawn system makes it impossible to do any other quests, as you're constantly being interrupted by combat encounters, but because the sanity system ramps itself up so exponentially fast that it isn't long before any hope of a normal playthrough is completely derailed by a non-optional sanity system that constantly berates you with auditory and visual hallucinations and turns the face of every NPC into an unrecognizable blob. The means of resolving any of this is hard to determine at first, and requires killing several enemies to gather clues, or holding dialogue with the girl to determine how to progress. Inevitably, everything leads you to a location I won't spoil, where an NPC is set to appear to assist with these matters, but for me he simply never did. I couldn't find Black Phillip anywhere, and much of the progression of these quests relies entirely on chance, and randomized time intervals that could mean a variance of several real-time hours between playthroughs before you get to encounter things that ought to be more hard-coded and repeatable. The worst instance of this, in my opinion, is this unique system of invoking or being drawn into hell. At any time you can be dragged into hell, which, through some creation engine magic, transforms the entirety of the Commonwealth into something almost unrecognizable. Bare trees, dead vegetation, ash in the air, fire and brimstone everywhere, blood and guts strewn all about. This mod's vision of hell and the way that it retitles every location you visit into some variation of hell is nothing short of a technical marvel. I especially love the new enemies you encounter that are bound exclusively to hell. This experience is easily one of the mod's greatest assets, yet it's hiding in such a way that I never once experienced it naturally, even in waiting around for several in-game days at the aforementioned location of interest, where Hell's Gates are said to most commonly open. I actually had to counsel my way into Hell just to capture footage to show you. I don't entirely understand the appeal of hiding away, such an amazing aspect of the mod in such an obscure, impossible to replicate manner, and I wish it was a more common or easily replicable event. Having to follow vague clues to piece things together is one thing, but then having quest stages and aspects of the gameplay loop locked behind random, inconsistent events and triggers makes many of the overriding gameplay systems introduced by the curse at times more of a nuisance than immersive. And sadly, there isn't really any way to modify individual aspects of the curse besides turning it off or on entirely. Perhaps there is more modularity to it in dialogue with the girl, but I was having issues interacting with her as the mod progressed for unknown reasons, where she would simply skip through the delivery of dialogue even when I selected options to talk to her. So then we get into Whispering Hills, a mod that, while perhaps not as dynamic and customizable as Grim, better integrates its gameplay systems in a way that feels more balanced overall in my opinion. Whispering Hills also has the benefit of still being actively developed to this day, thereby leveraging and improving upon several aspects of what made Grim great. Whispering Hills was developed by an absolute titan of the modding community, Manga Club. Manga Club comes from similar roots of developing iconic weather and lighting mods for both Fallout 4 and Skyrim, and taking the expertise learned in creating those mods to hone their efforts into a full-scale overhaul. Whispering Hills is Manga Club's baby, his pride and joy, and since he is one of the most selfless, kind individuals you'll ever meet, he will never admit to the fact that he has worked almost single-handedly on bringing this experience to life over the course of the past 4 years. The Whispering Hills team consists of a wide array of talented individuals who are all assisting in whatever ways they can, but the magic that you'll see showcased throughout this video comes almost exclusively from the manic mind of a man who has routinely exhibited an absolute mastery of the creation engine, bending and twisting it to his will and into forms that many thought to be impossible. What Manga Club has managed to accomplish with Whispering Hills is nothing short of a miracle, and ought to be recognized and examined examined as such in the community to help inform equally impressive means of modifications in the future. This mod is so good, it serves as almost my entire purpose behind making this video, and really just wanting to gush over how great it is and have it be recognized by more people. But let's start with what all this mod actually does. Well, similar to Grim, Whispering Hills overhauls every visual aspect of the game, in this case with the intention of emulating the look and feel of the Silent Hill games, from which this mod draws all of its inspiration. The visuals are less customizable as the in-game holotape features only a limited set of options, and there is no complementary ENB preset. But I've personally always preferred the simplicity of Whispering Hills' visual palette, particularly in its weathers, and how they ultimately just boil down to fog, and more fog, which really helps cover up the game's truly abysmal distant textures. Also with Grim, you'd occasionally get these very incongruous, rough-looking, clear day weathers that really ruined the sense of immersion for prolonged periods of time. And unlike Grim, you can actually select the current weather at any given time, even though it does essentially just boil down to varying densities of fogginess. Whispering Hills also features its own custom soundtrack, and though it is less dynamic as a whole, great consideration was put into tying tracks to specific regions and locations on the map to perfectly complement the setting, helping to establish a sense of unease but also familiarity exclusive to each part of the Commonwealth that you visit. Where I feel Whispering Hills really edges out the competition in feeling like a more comprehensive overhaul in total is its main quest line, which ties together the experience into a complete package. Unlike Grim, this quest line already exists as part of the world right from the start, and the Commonwealth starts entirely possessed by the entities of Hell. Also contrasting from Grim, there isn't any rush to pursuing this quest as there is no sanity system to contend with or constant threat of being stalked. As you explore the Commonwealth, you'll find custom hand-placed NPCs in places that make sense for them to be, such as a missionary in a church, a corpse licker in a cemetery, or nurses in a hospital. This approach to me feels more custom-tailored or thematic and removes the ensuing chaos of constant dynamic enemy spawns, allowing you to still enjoy the base game quests if you wish. Whispering Hills also has its own interpretation of a transformation into Hell that, while certainly less detailed and immersive on the whole, is far more responsive and customizable. Entirely at random as you explore the Commonwealth, you may be dragged into the other world where everything around you turns pitch black and unique creatures from Hell spawn all around, closing in on you slowly but surely. It is a genuinely terrifying experience that stops you dead in your tracks and forces you to hunker down in some type of shelter to wait out the event. The best part is that you can customize the frequency of this event occurring or even disable it entirely via the settings holotape. Though I do love keeping it on as it serves as a constant reminder of you being caught in an oppressive hellscape with no means of escaping, wherein you are unable to let your guard down for even a second. Once you do decide to begin the Whispering Hills questline, you'll come to find that this is where all the magic of the mod lies. I recommend trying Whispering Hills even if it's just for this questline, as there's simply nothing else quite like it. The questline has been released episodically on a typically annual basis, with 4 episodes released so far, and the 5th and final episode set to release in 2025. Depending on your level of involvement and intellect, you could spend anywhere from 4 to 10 hours playing through what's there so far, and with the amount of content and area to explore added, I'd argue this constitutes as a DLC-sized expansion of the game in its own right. It's a degree of commitment and technical mastery that no other mod can even hold a candle to, in my opinion. Whispering Hills' main questline is ultimately a dramatic retelling or compilation of various characters, settings, and storylines from several Silent Hill games, mostly 1 and 3, formed together into one cohesive narrative that offers an experience you simply can't get anywhere else. Everything you know and love from Silent Hill is here. The iconic enemies, the music, the uncanny valley of an environment that looks somewhat worldly and familiar but is seemingly endless and abstract in its construct. And my god, the custom texture work is just immaculate. Countless hours were spent handcrafting custom enemies and environments made entirely from scratch, even including some of the same locations from the Silent Hill games, such as the Midwich Elementary School and El Camilla Hospital. It doesn't take long while playing to realize that this mod was created by someone who truly understands the foundations of Silent Hill, and furthermore, survival horror. The scripted events that occur throughout the questline are of particular interest in the way that they contribute to the overall experience, playing almost like a standalone game. For example, when you first enter Whispering Hills proper, all of your items are removed and you're left with nothing more than a locker full of rudimentary items for survival. This is something I've never seen another mod do, so credit where credit is due. And in each episode, much like Silent Hill, once you complete a certain objective, the location you just finished exploring will turn into the hellish otherworld version of itself, turning everything on its head and forcing you to recollect your general familiarity of the environment to navigate your way through a seemingly endless maze. Perhaps the best instance of scripted events takes place in episode 2.5, which is essentially a rough recreation of the iconic PT Silent Hill demo, in which you are trapped in an endless loop of repeating hallways and doors, but each time you pass through, you are subjected to some new grotesque type of horror until everything descends into absolute madness.
You really resent your baby, don't you? A piece of yourself. The piece that got your lover killed. He was supposed to be the best of yourself, but not even that was good enough.
This sequence is the culmination of all of this mod's best qualities, evoking a sense of pure dread consisting of technical wizardry on a level unlike anything I've ever seen in a mod for a Bethesda game. I'll stop here with the later specifics since I don't want to spoil too much about the questline, which I highly recommend experiencing firsthand. But before wrapping up, I did want to offer a few tidbits of criticism that I came across while playing. When it comes to a modded experience, first impressions are everything, and the quest for Whispering Hills starts with a quest giver right outside of Vault 111, which I never quite understood the placement for as this sequence constantly breaks. Even with no other mods installed, the NPC will stop talking, disappear, stand on top of a table, get attacked, and do everything in his power not to talk to you. Every time I've tried starting this quest, something went wrong, which is why I've often just opted to head straight to Dunwich Borers to begin the quest, which you can do, but it's clear that the intent is to start with talking to Harry Manson in order to receive the motivation and backstory necessary to begin the quest. This opening conversation importantly recontextualizes the Commonwealth as a place inhabited less by radiation and more by an unknowable paranormal force that has enraptured the whole of the Commonwealth, bringing unspeakable monstrosities with it and fog covering every inch of the landscape. Additionally, the mod reimagines the main story of the protagonist's journey, searching for Sean within the depths of Whispering Hills that he's been taken into, instead of having been taken away by the Institute. This opening conversation is very important, but it is riddled with subtitles so poorly written that it stands to potentially ruin any sense of immersion for the player. I've encountered several comments on this mod from individuals who decided not to continue playing the questline because of this opening conversation, as it is full of awkward, stilted dialogue that somewhat appends the tone of the story with attempts at quirky jokes accompanied by the aforementioned subtitles. There's missing punctuation, grammatical and spelling errors, and entire missing words to such an extent that the subtitles rarely even match up to the spoken dialogue at all, in a really obvious and jarring way. Sadly, this is an issue that is not exclusive to just this one dialogue exchange either, and carries throughout much of the mod, though it has been improved in recent updates. But it's especially important to note here because it conveys an uneasy sense of a lack of polish for the mod as a whole in a way that doesn't do it justice, and may deter players from continuing. Everything to follow is nothing short of amazing, but again, first impressions are vital, and I feel that this mod could stand to improve dramatically on the whole with a complete rewrite of this opening dialogue exchange with Harry Manson that is both more tonally consistent and correctly subtitled. A lot of the dialogue throughout the mod could really stand to benefit from a rewrite to remove some of the more cringe-inducing jokes and remain with a more consistently serious tone instead of one that often feels at odds with the depressing, eerie tone that the rest of the mod so effectively evokes. The only other minor grievance I had while playing through Whispering Hills was it boiling down to a hide-and-seek key search throughout most of its playtime. This is, of course, consistent with the Silent Hill games being similarly fashioned, but it got to be a little more frustrating in this instance, given the fact that most parts of the buildings you explore look identical. Doors also close themselves constantly, and there is no map that dynamically updates to indicate which rooms you visited like there is in the Silent Hill games, so you'll likely end up running in circles on several occasions trying to retrace your steps back to locations that you may or may not have already visited. There is an effective use of notes and other clues to string you along, which is nice, but the sameness of every room and hallway will have you turned around quite often regardless. Luckily, this is largely alleviated beyond Episode 2, where the environment opens up a lot more and flaunts greater creativity and variety in its objectives for progression. And so that is ultimately Grimm and Whispering Hills in a nutshell. Both amazing in their own ways, but with a slight edge granted to Whispering Hills in my eyes, given how much more fleshed out and comprehensive of an experience it feels like on the whole. All of my horror playthroughs and most of the mods featured in this video were played with Whispering Hills installed, and the list I'm using was designed with Whispering Hills in mind as the foundation. It's good to start with one or the other, and then add everything else around it accordingly. And so from here, let's dive into the rest of the mods, starting with large-scale quest and location mods. I wanted to start this section with The Haunting, as it came close to being featured in the overhaul section of the video, but it isn't really comprehensive enough to be featured as such. Even still, it's perhaps the most technically well-rounded mod to be featured in this section, as it is more than just a quest mod. The Haunting has a similar nighttime spawning system to Grimm, only this one features no customization options and starts automatically, unfortunately. Things kick off promising enough in that you'll be walking along innocently enough in the middle of the night before you start to hear an ominous moaning in the distance that draws closer and closer. Soon the noise begins to take form before your very eyes as a ghost, and once that ghost touches you, the haunting immediately begins. A random object that serves as the catalyst of the ghost's unresolved trauma drops at your feet, followed by the spawning of an NPC referred to as the cleric. You're meant to talk with the cleric to get things started, but the dialogue was interrupted by combat for me, and after that the cleric refused to talk no matter what I did, so I decided to then attack the cleric, only to find that he's a protected NPC, so I essentially just entered into an endless loop of being chased by the cleric, who could not be killed or otherwise appeased, which completely broke my playthrough. I reloaded an earlier save and the same thing happened again. After multiple save reloads, I finally got it working and received an objective to go kill the NPC that killed the ghost in their mortal form, and essentially avenge their spirit. All really great stuff in concept, but sadly the execution continued to be lacking as things progressed. After being haunted by a ghost, the intention is to be visited by a haunting entity of some variety each night following, but for some reason I encountered no creatures from the mod the following 2 nights, and then somehow got haunted again by a completely different ghost. In that time, I also encountered a random event added by this mod where a siren in the water would call out to you to come help them, which is eerie in its own right, but when you go out to try and save them, your camera locks up multiple times for seemingly no reason as you draw closer, and then once you reach them, you just explode and die. I guess it's just meant to be a kind of clever trap, but then my camera kept having issues following this, so I had to reload a save before I was trapped by the siren, and from what I can tell in the mod comments, this seems to be a common bug. Several of the creatures you encounter from this mod are invincible, or so I thought. It's only in dialogue with the cleric that he gives you a book wherein you learn how to kill each creature, and most of them involve burning the creature to kill it. While this is also a really neat concept, it is rough in its execution, as if you don't have a fire item readily available, then you're simply forced to run away, which you often can't do because the creatures are too fast. If you do have a fire weapon, it has to be dealt as the final blow, made even more frustrating by the fact that the creatures are massive bullet sponges. I downed a witch who I had been setting on fire up until that point, but since the killing blow wasn't fire, it just stood back up fully recovered with all its health. I did that once again and then finally killed it with a final flaming blow, and then it exploded and flew away, so I didn't even get to loot it for an item item to trade with the cleric. To that end, there are minor gameplay systems introduced by the haunting via the cleric, where you can effectively end the haunting or purchase charms to fend them off, but they are rather confusing to figure out and require you go and obtain items by killing certain creatures to barter for charms. But again, the process of killing said creatures is more tedious than enjoyable. Possessed items in particular, while technically quite fascinating in the way that they operate, are nothing more than a nuisance in being an unkillable enemy that follows you everywhere. If it comes indoors, then your screen will just keep flashing while objects fly at you, and sometimes you'll fall over and it just gets to be terribly obnoxious. Several of the enemies in general are rather incongruous to one another as well. You have ghosts and possessed objects, which are more paranormal, but then you also have werewolves, fairies, large tree imps, and trolls, which are more fantastical and don't really mesh with the theme or mood of the mod, and come across as rather out of place. Just as I was starting to figure things out while playing this mod, the cleric somehow died with a pop-up message claiming I killed them even though I didn't, and that the haunting may have disappeared, or maybe it didn't. It was pretty vague and confusing. There are also systems tied to being able to turn into a werewolf and vampire, which sound really cool, but unfortunately the myriad issues or frustrations I ran into had me removing the mod before I could get far enough to explore that. With absolutely no means of customization or even disabling the haunting, it makes for a progressively more frustrating and disruptive rather than complementary experience on the whole, unfortunately. While I love everything about this mod in concept, and it is no doubt a work of passion that I thought I could slide seamlessly into a horror-based playthrough, I can't recommend it in its current state, as too many of its elements and execution bring the playthrough to a halt or otherwise ruin any sense of genuine immersion. I think with some added forethought and additional polish, this mod could serve to offer much of what Grimm's gameplay systems and quests did in an even more captivating manner. The bones are there, but this one could really use a bit more love to make for a more consistently enjoyable experience. Children of Ug-Qualtoth, and my apologies in advance if I'm mispronouncing that, offers an in-depth exploration into an in-lore being first touched on in Fallout 3 by my understanding, but not really touched on much in universe since then. The story of Ug-Qualtoth, a mythical object of worship to a specific subset of characters in the Fallout universe, is truly fascinating and rife with potential, so it makes me all the more sad that modders are the ones having to explore it. Ever since coming upon the Dunwich obelisk in the basement of the Dunwich building in Fallout 3, I was enraptured by this idea of what the Fallout games could be if they leaned ever so slightly more into the horror angle inherent in a post-apocalyptic environment. This modded quest introduces everything I had wished for and envisioned at that point in time to deliver a truly unique standalone experience unlike anything I've ever played. When you have this mod installed, it actually starts automatically by going to sleep for the first time after turning level 10. You are thrown into a nightmarish dream sequence which sets the foundation for the rest of the mod and what's to come in a very suspenseful and masterful way. I love the bewilderment that most users of this mod that I've seen stream it experience in suddenly being pulled into this event out of the blue with no idea what to expect from it or how it started. This quest start introduces an element of dynamic gameplay that really manages to catch the player off guard and hook them with an immediate attention grabber, which is absolutely necessary given that in order to start the quest proper, you'll have to hike all the way over to the far reaches of the glowing sea and enter an abandoned church to kick things off. As you take the elevator down into the mines where the majority of this mod takes place, you'll feel your stomach sinking right with it, as the oppressive soundscape and eerie visuals make you feel as though you are literally descending into hell on the longest elevator ride ever. I don't want to give away too many specifics about this mod as it is just brimming with dreadful tension throughout that can only be properly experienced by playing it yourself. What I will say about this mod is that everything it introduces feels fresh and original. The enemy design, largely consisting of these dark black weeping angel-esque creatures, is extremely unnerving. Yet another instance of scripting or AI wizardry where the mod author somehow managed to make it so that these enemies will stop moving when you look at them, but start moving whenever you look away. You will likely get jumped jump scared more times than one, trying to pass through these large swaths of enemies, thinking you have them all captured in your field of view, only to be flanked from behind. What really adds to the suspense is the immaculate sound design of the custom soundtrack, paired with lots of disturbing ambient sounds filtering in from all ends of the mines that you find yourself lost in. Needless to say, my butt cheeks were clenched throughout the majority of playing this mod, which, like any good quest mod, manages to not overstay its welcome or spread itself too thin, as it ramps up the degree of difficulty as you progress, and delights you with a series of thoroughly impressive and wholly unexpected visual tricks and meticulously detailed environments. One aspect I've always struggled with in this mod, regardless of level, that is more of a warning than a criticism, is in regards to that progressive ramping up in difficulty. That comes primarily by way of these unique enemies that, when killed, spawn a little head crab that will explode and throw poisonous goo everywhere when you shoot it. It can get to be rather frustrating contending with these, as you will find yourself having to either ignore enemies entirely or run the risk of being surrounded by head crabs that you can't shoot, since their explosive spread seems to reach a mile across any given room. Pair that with the fact that you are having to run around very tight corridors looking for clues or special items as a means of continuing, and you will eventually find yourself in an endless loop of save reloads that will test your determination and patience to see things through. But I can promise the end result of finally completing the quest is always worth it, even if it ends up taking longer than you might have hoped. It is difficult, but fairly so, I'd say, and in a way that you can overcome if you adapt accordingly. So not much more to say on this one other than that I highly recommend it, as it is one of the very best quest mods for Fallout 4, and now with its recent Definitive Edition Redux release, there has never been a better time to give it a try. With this next mod, Anguish, or Feed Me to the Monsters, I sadly found myself at the absolute lowest point of my enjoyment throughout my playthrough. By the mod author's own admission, this mod was more intended as a proof of concept exploration into the inner workings of the creation engine, and you can never deny the passionate effort that goes into an independent project like this. I was hesitant to even include this mod in the video because of this, but in order to be comprehensive and cover all my bases, I wanted to put it in here just to be inclusive of everything that could be considered horror in terms of quest mods. With that being said, I'll be frank and upfront in admitting that I can't recommend installing this mod in its current state. Apparently the author is looking to re-release the mod at some point entirely rebuilt from the ground up, but they've also seemingly been radio silent for a few months, with no sign of progress since, and the Discord server they link to on the mod page is dead. This mod has some really promising foundations to it, and I'd love to see the author revisit it, factoring in everything that they've learned since. I'm hopeful that my discussion of the mod here may help serve as feedback to consider in doing so, however harsh it may seem. So Anguish begins in this massive towering building just outside Sanctuary that is impossible to miss and just screams horror. The issues for me unfortunately kicked off right from the get-go and persisted throughout, largely tied to the common insistence of horror quest mods to overly rely on a game of hide-and-seek key searching. However, unlike a mod such as Whispering Hills, which operates similarly, this mod makes the mistake of placing those keys in places where they could easily be missed or otherwise may clip outside of the playable game world entirely, making it impossible to progress. The placement also often seems random, with rarely ever any clues or indications of where to find them, requiring you to just aimlessly scour every inch of every room in the hopes that you may find one. For example, to enter this Loken building, you must first find a key, as every exterior door to the building is locked. To know the location of the key, you must interact with a terminal hiding in plain sight on the outskirts of the building, which redirects you then to a series of small buildings added by the mod just outside the Red Rocket truck stop. It refers to the key as being there in a general sense, but offers no hint as to where exactly to find it, so you have to search up and down every inch of these buildings inside and out, and I could not for the life of me find the key, even after reading through comments on the mod. And I suspect it may just have clipped through the ground or something, as that wasn't the only time this would happen while playing this mod. I actually had to counsel the key in to be able to finally enter the building, which more so just begs the question of why such a wild goose chase is necessary to begin with just to enter the building when the meat of the mod takes place inside of it, and there are already enough keys to go around looking for thereafter. After finally getting inside, I was treated to what was largely a mannequin gallery. Mannequins here, mannequins there, mannequins in every which direction, but very little that would come across as genuinely surprising or visually unique. From here, the technical issues with the mod spiraled further as I continued searching for keys because there was absolutely no indication of where the key to progress was, was, so again I was having to search every nook and cranny until finding one conveniently at the bottom of a toilet. From a visual standpoint, a lot of the custom texturing and lighting is pretty rough. Overblown lighting, low resolution textures, empty white voids, and so on. The enemy design feels sporadic and completely disparate. There's no music or sound design to speak of, leaving many of the rooms you explore feeling empty and hollow. There isn't really any story or lore to speak of, despite the environments themselves holding great potential for such connective narrative tissue to exist. Despite reading through several terminal and note entries scattered about, I never got the impression of any through line between everything I was experiencing, making it all feel rather slapdash and experimental. I will say the best part was when, upon leaving the building, you find yourself exploring a small Silent Hill-esque town with lots of small buildings to enter into and even a custom vendor. It's clear that the author spent a lot of time building all of this out, but with the mod as a whole being so rough around the edges, and with no real narrative motivation or technical feat worth experiencing to speak of, it all ultimately just boiled down to aimless wandering through a funhouse of random visual gags and odd exhibits. The most important aspect worth mentioning with this mod that factors into my overall consideration of it on a technical level is how if you open it up in xEdit, you'll see that for some inexplicable reason, it seems to override almost every single cell and world space present in the base game of Fallout 4, despite only adding buildings outside of Sanctuary and Red Rocket. I can't find any reason as to why the author would choose to do this, besides perhaps some profound technical mistake that occurred early on in development and was forced to carry on into all future iterations. This critical error in implementation requires you to load the mod as high in your load order as possible, or otherwise risk the possibility of it overriding every other mod in your load order that adds or alters base game locations. Due to the profound number of conflicts this introduces, it may be best to avoid the mod entirely until such a time that this may be resolved. Overall, I think that with several months of polish and reconsideration, this mod could develop into something more fully realized, but unfortunately I have to recommend passing on this one for the time being. And now on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, we get into one of the most technically impressive mods ever made for a Bethesda game in my mind, period. Resident Evil Saferooms. What could have been a simple recreation of one or two iconic safe rooms from the Resident Evil series turned into a whopping series of 11 scattered across the map, all implemented in a technically correct way with full nav meshing plus a custom settlement and a full recreation of Raccoon City from Resident Evil 2. Each safe room, in addition to being extremely detailed with custom textures and environmental design features, contains an iconic typewriter for saving, connected item stashes for safe item keeping shared between safe rooms, brand new items and recipes for crafting, and even music from the Resident Evil series that precisely matches the game that room is tied to, as an added cherry on top. The excitement of stumbling upon these safe rooms while exploring the Commonwealth and finding another place I could seek refuge and simply just hang out while vibing to classic Resident Evil music evoked a rush of nostalgia that I can't properly convey in words. Through this mod's exceptional attention to detail, I was immediately whisked away to the world of Resident Evil by exploring just a single room. Perhaps the most stunning feat of all in this mod would be the recreation of the Raccoon City Police Department. I was simply blown away by the overly precise environmental design on display here, as I felt like I was re-experiencing that moment of entering the RCPD again for the first time. Despite the unforgiving lighting making things especially dark and difficult to see, which may have been exacerbated by lighting mods I installed, I tried capturing some footage for you here just to promote how awesome this recreation is. The only aspect of the mod that managed to underwhelm was the recreation of Raccoon City itself, which you can enter into by interacting with an APC placed outside of Red Rocket. While it is exciting to see iconic parts of Raccoon City recreated here in Fallout 4, including even the Kendo gun shop, which even goes so far as to include a holotape recording from Joseph Kendo himself,
"The Kendo gun shop is your home now. Take care of it, and it will take care of you."
a lot of the environment is clearly material swapped from other parts of the game. The layout is rather confined and confusing, mostly just leading to several dead ends with various doors and manholes that open but don't go anywhere, and there's also an overwhelming amount of friendly human NPCs strewn about, where I feel enemies such as ghouls may have made for a far more fitting and intense experience. It would also be great to hear some of that iconic Resident Evil music carried over here while exploring the city, instead of vanilla Fallout 4 music. By the author's own admission, Raccoon City is a work in progress, but similar to Anguish, there haven't been any visible signs of updates or progress in several months, which is really disheartening to see. I'd love to know what could come of the RCPD and Raccoon City in particular being more fleshed out, and hopefully this video may help serve as inspiration behind the author wanting to revisit the mod. Be sure to send some love and interest his way on the mod page if you like what you see here and want to see the mod continued. This is one of my absolute favorite Fallout 4 mods that I cannot recommend highly enough. The Wilderness is an entirely self-contained world space separate from the Commonwealth, begging to be explored and enshrouded in mystery, brought about by mod author El-Ha or Zorkaz, who has created more mods for Fallout 4 than anyone else in existence as far as I'm aware, and yet somehow manages to make a meaningful contribution out of each one. There are several horror-themed mods that Zorkaz has created over the years, but there is also a clear distinction between those of which he has invested more time into than others, and the Wilderness resides at the very top of his best works. Several of his smaller complementary mods will be featured toward the end of the video. So as mentioned with the Wilderness, you find yourself in a brand new environment with unique locations to investigate. From the initial onset, the Wilderness doesn't necessarily appear to be a horror mod. It's just a really big forested, ominous landscape with several small buildings and caves to check out. That is until... Yeah, the Wilderness is haunted by a ghost because, of course it is. From here, you start on a small quest to investigate what exactly happened on this island, as well as the origins of this paranormal entity and how to get rid of it. I will mention that the Whispering Hills weather appears to have carried over to the Wilderness in my case, further contributing to the uneasy sense that something is wrong with this place right off the bat. But normally the weather here is actually quite lovely and unsuspecting. If you're just looking for a cool new environment to explore with little to no tension, the Wilderness can be just that, but after you interact with a certain location, the chase is on, until you manage to find a way to bring it to an end. Luckily, unlike the haunting, this is a ghost you can outrun, and that will disappear and leave you alone every so often if you manage to escape its immediate vicinity. Although I can understand some minor criticisms leveled against the mod, along the lines of much of the world space appearing samey and somewhat visually uninteresting, I think there are enough unique landmarks around that give you a scenic view of the land to really appreciate all the work that went into creating it. The soundtrack tied to certain locations, such as music that plays exclusively when you enter the town of Rhineham or explore the Firewatch Tower, helps further establish a sense of place and identity to these otherwise desolate environments as well. There isn't anything necessarily exceptional about the experience of entering the Wilderness, but it is a place I like to explore and seek comfort in solitude from the chaos of the Commonwealth from time to time. It is detailed in its construct and immersively atmospheric to enter into, which is why I do highly recommend checking out the Wilderness to experience the uncanny discomfort of a lovely little island with something more sinister going on beneath the surface. Our next featured mod, Raider Children and Other Horrors of the Commonwealth, is a mod that is rooted in intrinsic controversy, but it has the word horror right there in the title, so I couldn't not cover it here. There are aspects to this mod that I think bring forth a unique and fresh gameplay perspective that can't be found in any other mod, and then there are other aspects that I believe take it too far. The main gameplay element that this mod adds is a truly diresome, arguably realistic scenario, which none of the Fallout games lean into, but no doubt would be the reality of a post-apocalyptic environment, in which children are taken into raider factions essentially for child slavery, and to help fight amongst their ranks. As such, this mod adds several scenarios in which you are forced to kill children. Nothing quite introduces you so effectively to the harshness of the mod's intent than being faced with a child carrying a shotgun as soon as you cross the Sanctuary Bridge. It's a disturbing and harrowing gut punch of a moral dilemma every time you encounter it. And for those striving for a different type of visceral, psychological horror in their playthroughs, this mod adds a disturbing element of realism that no other mod does. This certainly wouldn't be the first mod to ever make children killable in a Fallout game, as this is not a novel concept to the modding community. But this mod in particular takes it a step further by fully envisioning a world in which child slavery was actually taking place, with evidence of such actually integrated into locations across the Commonwealth in a fairly immersive way. While I can generally respect the creative inspiration behind Raider Children in a general sense, this is not all that the mod adds. Where this mod goes too far in the eyes of many, including myself, is with this side quest essentially involving a morbidly disturbed individual named Big Al, who is alluded to in flyers found throughout the Commonwealth and is advertised as being up for paying money for child test subjects, as they're referred to. Upon entering Big Al's den in Backstreet Apparel, you come to find that Big Al was essentially filming CP and murdering these children after. And while there isn't anything sexually explicit involving children to be found in the mod itself, there is certainly more than just mere implication present here. The things you discover in this setting and everything related to it stretch beyond what I feel was necessary to convey the depravity intended behind the mod author's creative vision. Though I'm sure there are many who would just as readily choose to defend this decision, I can't justify any reason as to why it seems necessary or how it adds creatively to the purpose or tone the mod is attempting to convey. With that being said, I didn't create this video to provide moral grandstanding, but I did want to give a fair warning before considering playing this mod. While it may scratch a unique itch for some, this one may be better left alone entirely if such additions would come across as more upsetting to you than naturally fitting or complementary. These next two mods are actually interconnected to one another and form a complete story between the two of them, so I recommend trying both of them out together to experience the full narrative. For Kelly Manor Horror, the first mod created in this series, I don't have much to say on it. It's a spooky haunted house mod that was clearly the first step or iteration into what would later come to be fully realized in a far superior follow-up mod. I mostly just wanted to touch on this as a preface to Kelly Macabre, as it provides some satisfying backstory behind that mod. Basically, for Kelly Manor Horror, you stumble upon a manor north of Parsons Creamery that can only be seen if you interact with an object outside of it, which is pretty cool. Once you enter the manor itself, you'll be left searching for keys again, and hiding from Freddy Fazbear for 20 to 30 minutes as you make your way through a short story about this Madison Kelly girl who is just haunting it up all over the Commonwealth. I do like how both of these mods are fully voiced, and the voice acting is actually really solid throughout. Even if this one scream peaked so hard, it nearly made me go deaf. So yeah, there's not much to say on this one really, as it didn't leave any lasting impression one way or the other, but I do recommend it just in preparation for the next mod, which I do highly recommend. Kelly Macabre uses that auto start after a certain level feature from Children of Ug-Qualtoth that I love so much, as after turning level 20, this girl will just appear out of thin air and basically demand you follow her to a special place, and out of fear of what might happen if you don't go, you naturally agree to join her. Although Kelly Macabre is of a similar length and likewise involves searching for keys or means of progression through a sort of manner, the set dressing and atmospheric tension here, both in its visual and auditory design, is exceptional. I found myself constantly unnerved by everything I was experiencing and uncertain of what to expect around every corner. Also, the objectives you have to complete to proceed are actually pretty creative, such as one where you must find a series of ingredients necessary to create a timed explosive at a chem station that can be used to blow a hole in a wall, granting access to a sort of underground lab. There's even a sort of cutscene that plays at the end of the mod, and a truly badass reward weapon for completing the quest. Overall, Kelly Macabre, while short and sweet to complete at around only 20 to 30 minutes, is an engrossing and unsettling little quest mod, with several clever puzzles and other neat little tricks up its sleeve. I highly recommend checking this one out and learning to appreciate the mischievous antics of Madison Kelly. Vault 1080 is yet another short and sweet 20 to 30 minute quest mod with a really fascinating backstory behind its development. At the time of Fallout 4's release, Nvidia was shilling the game for its innovative use of volumetric lighting that Nvidia helped streamline. It's clear from this mod and their active promotion of the game itself that Nvidia had a lot of direct involvement in leveraging the lighting of Fallout 4 as a showcase of their own technology. And to their credit, the lighting in Fallout 4 looks incredible to this day, even if every other aspect of the game's visual design is just awful. It is largely through mods that I came to appreciate this fact, given that the vanilla lighting conditions and weathers often do very little to demonstrate this. Vault 1080 was actually developed by employees of Nvidia, and serves as a showcase of some of the very best lighting effects Fallout 4 has to offer, particularly through its use of God rays, which are essentially these shafts of light that emit through an occluding object to produce a stylistically attention-grabbing visual sensation. What I love about this mod is that instead of just peddling you some generic tech demo, they actually created an entirely new environment to explore with a lore-friendly quest to boot. Nestled deep in the backwoods of Sanctuary, you enter into a marsh brimming with a moody atmosphere surrounded by a towering cathedral. Upon entering the cathedral, you get hit with a hell of a fitting song that lives rent-free in my head to this day, and after reading through some lore entries and opening the shaft of the church window, you're hit with those oh-so-lovely God rays. It may not look like much now, but I remember being blown away by this brief little lighting display in 2016 when I first played this mod. And of course the magic doesn't end there, as you will see several displays of immaculate lighting throughout this vault that you slowly make your way into. The vault itself is eerie and unsettling, crawling with ghouls around every corner, or in my case, clickers. One example in particular that stood out to me was this instance where I was standing and looking down a long hallway and all I could see were shadowy silhouettes of enemies slowly approaching until one lurched through a beam of light toward me. This is stylistic lighting to accentuate mood and atmosphere at its very best. As a cherry on top, this quest does have a little story of its own, with accompanying lore entries and ends with an actual moral dilemma surrounding the vault inhabitants who have somehow turned into feral ghouls but are still sentient and pacified. The unnerving tension of passing by these ghouls or clickers as they shamble around like zombies but refuse to attack you is genuinely captivating. So yeah, again, a very short quest mod, but one that makes the most out of its limited confines to deliver a horror experience unlike anything else, and a mod that I highly recommend. Claustrophobia starts in a condemned apartment complex on the outskirts of West Roxbury. This mod is basically the epitome of spooky, scary haunted house exploration, and is less of a quest than simply a building you make your way through, but it is extremely effective nonetheless. I couldn't think of a more fitting name as you pass through possibly the narrowest passages the player character could realistically fit through. I remember being so afraid of this mod when first trying it a few years back that I never actually managed to finish it, which ought to speak to how well it manages to evoke a sense of foreboding dread. And best of all, it does so entirely through clever set design and visual trickery rather than jump scares. Claustrophobia makes the most of its confined setting to deliver an experience that evokes horror in its purest form. And if you are in search of a more traditional horror quest mod that is simple yet straight to the point in its effective design, Claustrophobia is simply the cream of the crop, with a terrifying finale that tests both nerves and perseverance. Haunted Vault 165 is another horror quest mod that is sadly lacking in purpose or direction. The entire premise revolves around running into a Brotherhood of Steel paladin who is too afraid to go down into the vault, not because of the various gunners inhabiting it, but because there is some thing down there. The thing turns out to be a spooky ghost girl that just sits in a room the entire time you're down there and does nothing to bother anyone. In fact, there isn't even anything to suggest the girl is a ghost besides notes found on terminals throughout the vault. The gunners seem entirely unbothered by her presence and appear to enjoy their time sitting in complete darkness, just waiting for you to come and murder them. This quest just boils down to a shooting gallery, resolved by killing the gunner commander with an optional objective of exorcising the ghost girl by retrieving an object of interest to her. But even if you do return this item to her and complete the optional objective, she just continues to sit there, making you feel as though you accomplished absolutely nothing by going down into this vault. While it technically works as a mod and there isn't anything really broken about it, it ultimately really isn't worth checking out, as it introduces nothing new or unique and barely constitutes being a horror mod at all, outside of the text that claims that it's haunted. Maxwell's World is a mod that, on paper, sounds like it should be the best thing ever. A massive DLC-sized amusement park teeming with unique locations to explore, enemies to fight, and even a story that changes based on your choices, featuring fully voiced dialogue. This is a clear work of dedicated passion by a highly talented mod author that has been picking away at this mod to develop it into its current state for the past 8 years. Nobody can deny the sheer level of ambitious technical mastery on display in this mod, from the towering vistas of its visually captivating world space to the one-of-a-kind creature designs and multifaceted storyline tying it all together. And yet something about the mod just really didn't click with me and left me feeling generally dissatisfied. Not that there's anything really wrong with it per se, but it just didn't do anything for me personally. The only real technical issue I encountered was with the lighting and how much of it is clearly overblown and highly contrasted. And for whatever reason, this world space doesn't work with E&B presets, which is something I've never encountered in any quest or new location mod. Using an E&B here just causes endless flickering for some reason. I think a lot of my personal grievances with this mod just boils down to the tone and how it is so outlandishly silly and self-deprecating that it barely constitutes as horror. It evokes the same childish sense of horror that you'd get from walking through a cute haunted house designed for 6-year-olds. You fight ghouls that have been turned into clowns, haunted train cars, ghost skeletons that just appear out of nowhere and then pop out of existence when they take too much damage, these weird boat carousel looking things that just fly into oblivion when you kill them. Some of the boss designs are really cool and unique. There are several dialogue sequences with ghost people and the owner of the park where they just kind of pop out of existence when they're done talking. You can be accompanied by companions such as Sassy Woman or Skeleton Man with a handkerchief. Sure, all of these things are interesting, fun, and quirky in their own right, but they're not something I'd voluntarily choose to engage with over the course of a 3+ hour quest mod, and I found it all becoming increasingly grating and tedious as it dragged on, like being trapped in a funhouse with 100 different rooms. This mod is built around a really awesome concept with some amazing technical feats on display, and I'm sure it is simply a fun time for many who have undoubtedly enjoyed playing it, but it isn't really the type of horror I'm interested in or going for in a playthrough like this. Nevertheless, I wanted to cover it for the sake of being comprehensive, and in knowing I wouldn't be forgiven if I missed it, given how popular it is. Chalk this one up to more of a personal disagreement than anything being inherently wrong with it. It would be terrible of me to suggest not trying this mod given all the effort that has gone into it over the years. So I'd say give it a try if it seems like something that would be up your alley. Maxwell's World simply was a ride that I didn't enjoy riding. And finally, with our last quest mod to feature in this video, we're going out on an incredibly high note with In the Flesh, the most recently released horror quest mod to date, and also one of the most impressive. After entering into the quest through a random unsuspecting sewer grate embedded in a group of rocks north of Dunwich Borers, I was hooked immediately right from the onset. Through the use of exceptional stylistic lighting and custom asset or texture work, tension is set almost immediately, with a clear story being developed through visual cues leading to various notes and terminal entries that help better contextualize what you've just stepped into. Though the premise of the mod is rather simple, the execution is simply superb, and everything about it feels intricately planned and confidently integrated. Perhaps it's just because this was the only quest mod in this lineup that I played for the first time as part of this playthrough, but I found the creature designs in this mod to be perhaps the best I've seen in Fallout 4, meeting up neck and neck with the designs from Grimm. They are very reminiscent of games like Half-Life Half-Life and Dead Space, especially with some of the bosses, which I won't spoil here, and these terrifying flesh beasts that would sort of slunk their way out of a sewer pipe and right into your face. One unique aspect of this mod that I didn't see utilized in any others featured here were these highly intense chase sequences where a large, seemingly unkillable creature would be pursuing you from behind and your only choice was to run. This would even be paired with fast-paced music that would come together to form what felt like a proper cinematic sequence out of some other sci-fi horror game. The best mods do the most with the resources available to trick you into thinking you're playing another game entirely. And In the Flesh is among several of the greats featured in this video that managed to accomplish just that. This mod can be completed in just under an hour, but has tricks aplenty up its sleeve, so I will refrain from showing anything more and leave you to experience it for yourself. Definitely check out In the Flesh. And so with that, we enter into the final section of the video where I'll briefly touch on some honorable mentions that can be used to make your playthrough feel more like a proper, comprehensive horror overhaul. The aforementioned mods will get you pretty far, but consider the following non-quest horror or horror-adjacent mods to really drive home an additional layer of immersion. I want to start this with highlighting Project Dementia because it is a truly impressive amount of custom texture work that I find to be absolutely essential for any horror playthrough, and it's also criminally overlooked. I feel like a lot of this has to do with the fact that the mod description no longer even describes what the mod is. This project started with a simple retexture of a few objects into something more horror-oriented, and developed into the mod author wanting to create their own fully fledged horror overhaul of the Commonwealth. They never reached that point, but eventually ended up settling on a partially complete, but no less impressive, retexture of the entire Commonwealth that manages to accomplish the intended goal of transforming it into something completely unfamiliar. Blood-red water, bare and desolate vegetation, blackened, rusted buildings, and hellish quarry rocks are just a few examples of the multitude of objects this mod retextures. If you can justify the 11.5 GB download, I'd say this mod is an essential starting point and cornerstone to any horror run in Fallout 4. Next up are two HUD mods that complement one another perfectly. Immersive HUD allows you to toggle certain elements of the HUD off and on via the mod configuration menu to provide a, well, more immersive horror experience. Fall Souls takes things a step further by making it so that the game doesn't pause when you enter your Pip-Boy or the pause menu. Now before you get your panties in a bunch over the idea of not being able to pause the game at all, just know that this mod is entirely configurable via the mod configuration menu as well. You can choose to have the game pause when you enter the pause menu, console, terminals, and so forth, or alternatively make it harder on yourself and have it so that the game just never pauses. The purpose of this mod really is to have it so that entering the Pip-Boy does not pause the game, thereby making it so that changing up your arsenal or sorting through your inventory is more of a strategic decision that you can't afford to make in the heat of combat or you risk certain death. It adds a layer of intensity to combat that feels more authentic in being unable to cheese your way through any enemy encounter by just whipping your arm up every few seconds. Give it a try and see if it's for you. Fall Evil brings the creatures of Resident Evil into Fallout, as the name would imply. This mod, as with all of the creature mods I recommend in this video, adds these creatures into the game via dynamically integrated custom level lists or scripted injections, essentially meaning that even if you have mods that replace or alter the spawns of base game feral ghouls, these creatures will still spawn. Every technical aspect of the creature design, from the sights to the sounds, is amazing, making this an essential add for any horror playthrough. FGEP, or Feral Ghoul Expansion Pack, adds a new bestiary full of custom enemies into the Commonwealth, each of which boast a technically unprecedented aspect of AI evolution in some form or another. This is an essential addition for variety in really any Fallout 4 playthrough in my opinion. If you're looking for something a little more lore-friendly but no less unsettling in your creature mods, look no further than Defective Synths. These terrifying abominations come in several unique forms, all featuring a hellish hybrid between something resembling humans and robots that shamble around like zombies. An absolute must for any robophiles out there. KB47's Clickers is the only Discord exclusive mod to be featured in this video, but it is an absolute must in my opinion. KB47 has countless faction overhauls on his server that are unmatched in their quality and feature assets that simply couldn't be replicated on the Nexus. There are a lot of great retextures or replacements for feral ghouls out there, but this has to be my favorite. Clickers in a Fallout 4 horror playthrough just fits perfectly, and both the texture work and sound design here are perfectly implemented, offering a seamless one-to-one integration of the iconic Last of Us enemies. They even come in male and female varieties with the latest update. Truly amazing work. So now you have a bunch of new feral ghoul adjacent enemies to contend with, and let's say you want to see more of them. Well, look no further than SKK's Feral Knights, a mod that you can customize entirely to your liking via the mod configuration menu, which allows for dynamic spawns of feral ghoul hordes at night. The layer of intensity added by this mod is amazing, as you'll be wandering about at night only to run into a massive horde of zombies out of nowhere that you'll either have to run away from or gun down if you have the ammo for it. Certainly not for the faint of heart. In terms of set dressing, Creepy Paintings is a small but no less essential mod to really sell the feeling of being trapped in a paranormal otherworld of sorts, where nothing is quite what it seems. Where once was lovely photos of flowers and happy faces, now lies disturbing portraits drawn in from works inspired by Silent Hill and H.R. Geiger, to name a few. This mod has really grown on me over time and has become an important part of any horror playthrough. As you may have seen, several of the mods featured in this video make use of mannequins. Mannequins can be genuinely terrifying under the right conditions, and this mod makes it so that those conditions are such that you are startled every time you see one. Honestly, just mannequins. Mutilated Dead Bodies is another perfect mod for set dressing and is implemented in such a way that you'll be left wondering, did raiders commit these horrible atrocities, or was it something more sinister? Said atrocities are so horrible that I can't really even show them here without a blur, otherwise this video would be wiped entirely off the face of YouTube. Nevertheless, this is a genuinely disturbing mod that perfectly complements any horror playthrough if you can stomach it, so I highly recommend checking out the mod page to see if it's for you. The Mannequin Cult is a little mod I almost featured in the previous section of the video, but since it is just a simple, small dungeon to explore, I decided to put it here. Nevertheless, I love the concept this mod delivers on of a cult that has locked themselves away in a desolate subway station to worship a mannequin doll god. The cultists will attack you with mannequin arms, and the boss even uses a cannon that launches mannequin appendages at you. It's nothing short of brilliant, while also managing to be unsettling in its own unique way. A minor addition, but one I can't recommend highly enough. These next few mods are a smattering of Zorkaz mods that I mentioned earlier when covering the wilderness, but since they are so brief and more proofs of concept than anything, I wanted to feature them here instead. The Sewers is another highly impressive horror-adjacent mod from Zorkaz that allows you to traverse across the Commonwealth via an underground network of sewer tunnels. Sewers are inherently scary to me, and given how many abominations lurk down here, you'll be left wondering if you're better off just taking the streets above. Wildwood Cemetery Tombs is essentially just a mausoleum full of trapdoors that constitute a basic dungeon for some spooky exploration beneath the Wildwood Cemetery. The Cemetery, or Plainfield Cemetery, is just that, a self-contained cemetery world space you can briefly explore and optionally use as a custom settlement if you're into that sort of thing. The Backrooms is the Backrooms, if you ever wondered what they would look like in Fallout 4. In Blair Residence, you enter into possibly the most narrow livable tenement in existence, only to find it's of course inhabited by an unkillable knife-wielding child. My worst nightmare. For Fainthearth Manor, you enter a manor and get chased by an unkillable ghost that screams and cries. And now lastly, moving on to some audio mods. Grim and Whispering Hills already have you covered in the music department, but what about those other smaller finishing touches that allow for a more comprehensive horror soundscape? Another one's Brutal Death adds death sounds to almost all human enemies that you kill. What do I mean by that? Yeah, blood-curdling screams so disturbing that it'll make you actually feel a bit guilty about pumping a bunch of lead into a random stranger instead of just talking it out with them. This is another mod that tacks onto the angle of visceral or psychological horror that slowly whittles away at your sanity and guilty conscience. Sinister ambient sounds add several creepy sound triggers across the Commonwealth either throughout the day or only at night, depending on your install choice. These sounds are really effective and unsettling to me and add to a sense of immersion tied to feeling as though you're constantly being followed or watched from afar. Some tend to not like mods like this that add sounds for things that aren't physically present, but to me mods like these are an essential addition toward providing a fully immersive experience that refuses to give you a moment to catch your breath. The last mod I wanted to touch on isn't exactly a horror mod outright, but it does help contribute to an oppressive horror vibe. It's actually a radio station that you can tune into at any time with its own radio DJ. I actually have a long storied history with this mod in that I've installed it into literally every modded playthrough of a Fallout game between Fallouts 4, 3, and New Vegas for over 10 years now. In terms of immersive horror adjacent droning ambient music, nothing else comes close in the modding community in my opinion. The soundtrack is just timeless and filled with so many wholly unique tracks that influence so much of my work in music and media production. I've wanted for years to get in touch with the author of this mod, as I find it to be a sort of holy gospel that I desperately wish I could learn more about in terms of how they created it, and also extend permissions for it to be able to further its exposure. In light of the fact that there is no way of contacting them now, all I can do is continue to shill Existence 2.0 as the best music or radio mod ever made, and feature its music in the closing sections of this video. And so with that, we've finally reached the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed diving with me into the wild world of horror as envisioned through Fallout 4 mods. It's nothing short of a miracle that a means of crafting singular horror experiences within a game that has nothing to do with horror is within reach for anyone with the ambition to pursue it. Every mod featured in this video was the culmination of countless hours of creative passion, stemming from an individual's drive to create something, anything of substance, and more often than not evolving that into something singular with a legacy all of its own. The modding community is full of valiant efforts like this to showcase individual talent and passion, and this video is an attempt to establish a legacy in remembrance of all the hard work that goes into these often thankless endeavors. So thank you mod authors for making these mods, even if they are mods I personally didn't click with. Creativity breeds creativity, and it's better to have done something than nothing at all. Your work inspires countless others to try themselves and do things they never thought they could. I'll have all the mods featured in this video linked in the description, but if there are any mods featured in this video that I miss linking, and you want to know more about, please feel free to leave a comment and I'll get back to you. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you'd like to see more showcases like this in the future, and I hope you're able to use this video to create your perfect horror playthrough in Fallout 4.